Welcome back to the exciting book of Genesis. We're continuing on in our journey through the book of Genesis, and today we're going to be taking a look at chapter 18. All right, so that said, let's jump right in. You have my first reader read Genesis 18, 1 through 5, please.
And Yahweh appeared unto him in the plain of Marah, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the from the tent door, and bowed himself towards the ground, and said, My Adonai, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourself under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your heart, after that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant? And they said, So do, as thou hast said.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Okay, so here it is. We see Yahuwah appearing unto Abraham in the plains of Mamre. The plain speaks to an oak. It actually says the oak of Mamre. Mamre speaks to something that's lusty or strength or fatness. So, in a manner of speaking, you can see, him coming to him in an oak of strength, or an oak of lust, or even an oak of lust. And it says he bowed himself. He bowed himself to Shakar, number 78:12, which means to prostrate oneself. Now, there's some contemplation as to whether or not Abraham knew who he was dealing with right off. But whether he did or didn't, I can't really say. But what I can say is that this word Shakar, where it says that he bowed himself, it means to fully prostrate oneself. It's the word that's often translated as worship in your scriptures. And so another way of looking at this is that, he came and worshiped him. Which kind of leads me to believe that he knew who he was dealing with. Mm-hmm. Amen? Mm-hmm. It says in verse 3, he says, Abraham, that is, says, My Adonai. He calls him Lord. Mm-hmm. Again, that kind of speaks to maybe he knew who he was dealing with. Mm-hmm. Amen? Amen. And he says, if I found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee from thy servant. So he's even acknowledging himself as being his servant. Mm-hmm. And he tells him, hey, let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Now, this is something that a servant would do. Mm-hmm. So not only is he calling him servant, he's acting like a servant. Amen?
Hallelujah.
And he says, I will fetch a morsel of bread and comfort ye your hearts after that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant, so I can take care of you. So I'm going to take care of you, Now, so it seems to me that he kind of knew who he was dealing with, because you have to think and remember, Abraham, he had, he wasn't just anybody in that land. He had just went up against the king, got his comrades together, and went and took back Lot from the pagan kings. He was very well respected. Yep. So much so that we read in Genesis 23:6, it says, Hear us, my Lord. They're talking to Abraham now. It says, Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. Now, they said, Here is my Lord, thou art a mighty prince. among us, you know, but in the Hebrew, this actually says that thou art a exalted God among us. You know, that's what it literally says in the Hebrew. You know, so I'm pointing that out to show that, you know, Abraham just wasn't anyone in the land. He had built a reputation. You know, he was recognized and very well respected, you know, in the land. Amen.
Amen.
You know, and so here it is, he coming and he's acting like a servant. You know, and I know it's because he knew his L when he seen him. Amen.
That's it.
You know, and he went and he was serving him. You know, verse 6 says, and Abraham hastened to the tent. Hastened into the tent unto Sarah. Another thing I wanted to point out, it says as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day, which is something that was customary for them to do during that time. You know, oftentimes the heat of the day speaks to the hottest point of the day, you know, and it was actually dinner time. You know, so he may have eaten already, maybe not, I don't know. But oftentimes they would eat during that time. And it says he looked up his eyes. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood. And it says he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself towards the ground. Now, bowing was customary in their culture. But not the type of bowing that Abraham did. You know, it was customary. I mean, even the type he did, but it was only reserved for like very, very, very important people. You know, in which they would bow and lie prostrate to the point to where their head touched the ground. You know, so this is very revelatory as well. You know, and also normally when they were sitting in the tent door and a stranger comes up to the door. Only for VIPs, for very important people, do the one that's sitting in the door get up and go to the stranger. You know, so this is all this is just showing, you know, very strong evidence that, you know, he recognized who they were. Okay, verse 6 says, and Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah. It said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. All right, now a measure is a measure of flour or grain, and it's equal to 1/3 ephah. And it's something I want to point out, you know, that I found within this, you know, speaking to the spiritual aspect of things, you know, even though we're not going to jump completely off into the spiritual aspect of things yet. But I want to point this out, you know, and, you know, in Judges 6:19 it says, and Gideon went in and made ready a kid and unleavened cakes of an ephah of flour. The flesh he put in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot, and he brought it out unto him under the oak and presented it. Okay, so this is very similar circumstances, right? You know, and also Gideon was given an offering unto Elohim. You know, he was given an offering unto an angel that was representing Elohim. Okay, and so we see he gave an ephah of flour. Now, something that you don't really see, you know, it says 3 measures or 3 seahs of grain. You know, it's equal to 1/3 ephah. So if he had 3 of them, then he had an ephah. You know, so Abraham actually told Sarah to make an ephah of grain, you know, to prepare an ephah of grain, because three measures or 3 seahs equal to 1 ephah. You know, so here it is, we see Gideon offering the same thing. You know, also when we take a look at 1 Samuel 1:24 with Hannah, you know, when she's offering to Elohim, in thanking him for giving her a child, says in verse 124, chapter 1, verse 24, says, and when she had weaned him, speaking of Samuel, she took him up with her with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of Yahuwah in Shiloh, and the child was young. So here it is again. This ephod is being offered, and it's being offered to Elohim. And also, I want to point out, something in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament. It says Matthew 13:33. Says, another parable spake he unto them, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal. Now that word hid actually can mean mixed in. And this is exactly what Sarah would have been doing. Now this is very revelatory when you consider, the spiritual aspect of Sarah, what she representing the new covenant. Now we see that the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened. Now once we understand that Sarah represents the new covenant, then we can see that this parable concerning the kingdom is also concerning the covenant of the kingdom. And she hid 3 measures of meal. Now the only thing about that is, when you take a look at Leviticus 2:11, it says no meat offering, speaking of a grain offering. I know it sounds contradictory, but when King James says meat, it actually speaking to grain. It says no meat offering or grain offering, which ye shall bring unto Yahuwah, shall be made with leaven. For ye shall burn no leaven, nor any honey, in any offering of Yahuwah made by fire. So when Yahushua was telling this parable, what do you think the people were thinking? When Yahushua was telling this parable, and he was telling them the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened, what do you think they were thinking? Thinking he just ruined it. He just ruined it. Because you're not supposed to put leaven in any offering to Yah.
Right.
So they're thinking he just ruined it. But this was prophetic. Of Yahushua was actually teaching that his covenant, that the kingdom, would be it would get infiltrated. It will get messed up. Which is exactly what happened. This is what he was teaching in this parable, and this comes right behind another parable of the wheat and the tares, and how the tares was mixed in with the wheat. So it's actually showing the same concept or the same thought. He's just telling it in a different way. This leaven, was problematic. And it will be mixed in to the new covenant, and it will cause it not to be an acceptable offering unto Yah. So I thought I had this other passage in there, but consider what Yahshua would tell his disciples when he would tell them, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. See, because that's the leaven that was mixed in with the new covenant.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that caused it to become ruined. Amen?
Amen.
So I want you to be able to see that spiritual picture, because it's an important one. See, because a lot of people, even now today, when they come out of quote-unquote Christendom, they jump out of the frying pan of Christendom and into the skillet of Judaism. And they go and get that very same leaven, and they mix it in with their covenant and ruin it.
Mess, yeah.
Amen?
Amen.
Everybody see that spiritual picture? That's huge. All right, so Genesis 18:7. I did, yeah, okay. Genesis 18:7, and Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. Now, this calf also is revelatory. The word calf here is actually 2 words, but only one of them is getting translated. Well, I guess in a manner of speaking, they're both getting translated, but it's literally saying son of an ox. It speaks to a bullock. And whenever these 2 words are presented together, usually it's translated as bullock, or usually bullock follows it. You know, in Exodus 29:1, it says, "And this is the thing that thou shalt do unto them to hallow them, to minister unto me in the priest's office. Take one young bullock and 2 rams without blemish." And of course, this is what Yah told them to do to sanctify the priesthood. You know, the bullock represented the high priest, you know, and the 2 rams represented his sons, his 2 sons. You know, so they spoke to Aaron and his 2 sons. You know, also Leviticus 4:3-4 also bears witness that the young bullock is an offering that was given in conjunction with the priest. You know, and probably other very, very important people, but you know, it definitely speaks to the priest. Leviticus 4:3-4. "If the priest that is anointed to do sin according to the sin of the people, then let him bring for his sin, which he have sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto Yahuwah for a sin offering. He shall bring the bullock unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before Yahuwah, and shall lay his hand upon the bullock's head, and kill the bullock before Yahuwah." You know, now, if you look at the picture, the spiritual picture that's being drawn here, then you see Abraham at Mamre. Mamre means lusty, you know. So, of course, that speaks to, you know, some type of sin. You know, you start lusting for the wrong things, you know. So, you kind of have a picture of one at this place of lust, you know, but Yah is coming to visit him. Yah comes to visit him, and he's offering a sacrifice. You know, it appears to be the spiritual picture that's presented. A young bullock, you know, which was offered for a sin offering. You know, and we already spoke about the 3 measures of fine grain, which that speaks to the best. That was the best that they had to offer during that time. You know, and that's what Abraham was giving them. You know, the best of the best in all actuality. You know, so that's the spiritual picture that's there. Is that exactly what happened? We have to ask when we see him. But the spiritual picture is definitely there, showing that is a possibility, because that is what they used that young bullock for. You know, that's what Scripture shows that it was used for, and not much else in all actuality. You know, Genesis 18:8 says, "And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them, and stood by them under the tree, and they did eat." Now, notice he wasn't eating with them. No. He stood by them under the tree. Now, this is also something a servant would do during that time. This is something that a servant would do. You know, so he's taking the role of a servant all the way through. You know, and, you know, which is very, very, very important if Yah ever comes to visit you. You know, don't think you're his equal. No. You know, make yourself his servant. Yes, humble yourself. Yes, yes. You know, bow before him, worship him. You know, give an offering. You know, even if you don't know that you sin, give one anyway. You know. So, right. You know, this is what we're being shown. You know, let me have my next reader read 2 Samuel 17 through 27 through 29, Judges 5:25, and Isaiah 7:14 and 15, please.
And it came to pass, when David was come to Mahanaim, that Shobi, the son of Nahash of Rabbah, of the children of Ammon, and Maher, the son of Amiel, of Lodbar, and Barzillai, and the Galadite of Rogelim, brought beds and basins and earthen vessels and wheat and barley and flour and parched corn and beans and lentils and parched pulse and honey and butter and sheep and cheese of kine for David and for the people that were with him to eat. For they said, the people is hungry, and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Judges 5:25. He asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter in a lordly dish. Isaiah 7:14 through 15. Therefore the Adonai himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Butter and honey shall he eat, and he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good.
Hallelujah. Okay, and what I'm trying to point out with these passages is that whenever in Scripture that butter is given to someone, you know, it's usually some type of king. You know, it's usually some type of king. We see it was given to King David. In Judges 5:25, this was actually given to I think her name was Yael. She gave it. She was giving this to King Sisera, you know, and right before she killed him, but you know, she had to butter him up.
Yeah.
Pun intended, you know, but you know, so it worked, you know, and then Isaiah 7:14, of course, is speaking to our Messiah, you know, speaking of when he comes, butter and honey shall he eat, because he was a king. Amen.
Amen.
You know, so, you know, what I want to point out is that this is something that you would give a king. This was the best of the best. You know, Abraham was rolling out the red carpet here. You know, he was going over and beyond. He was doing all that he could to please his guests.
Hallelujah.
You know, because I do believe he recognized who they were.
Yep.
You know, and he was really pulling out the red carpet and not holding up any stops. You know, he wasn't. He was doing all that he could do. Let me have my next reader read verses 9 through 15, please.
And they said unto him, Where is Sarai, thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarai, thy wife, shall have a son. And Sarai heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarai were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarai after the manner of women. Therefore Sarai laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure in my Adonai, being old also? And Yahuwah said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarai laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child, which am old? Is anything too hard for Yahuwah? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarai shall have a son. Then Sarai denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh.
Yeah, don't add insult to injury. Don't start lying on top of it. You know you laugh now. We're not gonna go there. You did laugh. You know. You know, but you know, here it is. Now we're gonna cut Sarah a little break though, okay? Because you know, we gotta paint this picture so that you can see the picture. You know, now it says, where's Sarah, your wife? Now she was in the women's quarters of the tent, and he would start saying, hey, I'm gonna come back, you know, according to the time of life. And so now Sarah laughed, you know, but we're not gonna take it be too hard on it, because after all, it's talking about Sarah having a baby, and at this time Sarah was 89 years old, and Abraham was 99. You know, so you can see why she was laughing to herself. You know, you saying I'm about to have a baby. I'm 80. You know I'm 89, right? you know I'm 89, and you know, and it says, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. You know, so she's not having her cycle no more. She's not making no eggs. Everything done dried up like the desert she living in. You know, and here it is, she being told, you're gonna have a child. So, you know, we're not gonna be too hard on her, because I can see why she may have laughed to herself, but you know, y'all come back at her in verse 14, and he asks a very serious question. He says, is anything too hard for Yahuwah? You know, there's nothing too hard for the Most High. It doesn't matter what your situation or circumstance is. I want you to know that there's not nothing too hard for the Most High. He can handle it.
That's right.
And even if he don't, it's not because he can't. Say lie.
That's right.
Amen? All right, so now, last week we spoke about Sarah and Hagar. You know, and so today we're going to continue on in that vein. And what I want you to do, some of you may need to put your rubber boots on because we may get a little deep here. But I really want to bring out the spiritual picture because outside of that, then it's just ancient history. Amen. You know, so and don't get me wrong. History lessons are wonderful, but we want to see how it applies to our lives now today and what effect it may have on us now today as well. Amen? Amen. And the only way we're going to do that is if we understand the spiritual aspect of it. You know, so I'm going to call your memory to what we went over last week, and that's Galatians 4:22 through 27. My next reader, please.
For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. Which things are an allegory, for these are the 2 covenants. The one from the Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Agar. For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, Rejoice, thou barren that bearest not. Break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For the desolate hath many more children than she which hath an husband.
Hallelujah. Okay. Okay, so what I want to be understood by this is that Hagar represents the old covenant. She represents the old covenant, Moshe, old Jerusalem, that now is, the one that's over there in the Middle East, along with those that are in bondage to the law, the Yahudim, who are still under the law. Amen?
Amen.
Now, Sarah, on the other hand, what this is teaching us is that Sarah represents the renewed covenant of Yahushua. Amen? And New Jerusalem, which is in the heavens, and those which are subject to Yahushua's commandments, his commandments, words and sayings. So you see the difference betwixt the two? Okay, so from this point on, we're going to take a look at Sarah in the sense of her representing the renewed covenant of Yahshua, New Jerusalem, and those who are subject to Yahushua's commandments within that new renewed covenant. Amen? Amen. Okay, so, and when we do this, it's so revelatory. It speaks, voluminously concerning, the renewed covenant. And it shows us how these things were depicted as to what would happen way back during the time that Genesis was written. That Yah truly was telling the end from the beginning. Amen? Amen. And that Yahshua truly is all throughout the Old Testament. So, now, first of all, let us consider if Sarah is the new covenant, then who is Abraham? Who does he represent? Both of those are good. They're good. They're good. They're really good. But not exactly what I'm looking for. Definitely represents the Creator. Definitely represents Yahushua, but also something else. And what I'm looking for is the house of Israel. Because when Yahushua was here and he made the covenant, he made it with the house of Israel. He said, I come only for the lost seed of the house of Israel. He sent his disciples out 2 by 2, and the 70 he sent out by 2 to whom? The house of Israel. And so this is what I want you to see. And so when we look at this now, we want to look at it through these spiritual lenses. Amen?
Amen.
All right, so St. Augustine, you know, he was a guy that lived in early times. You know, I think he died in like 430 AD. You know, so he lived not too long after the Messiah walked the earth. And he was very influential in the Western understanding of scriptures. He said something that I find to be quite profound, and personally I find to be true. He said the New Testament is concealed in the Old, and the Old Testament is revealed in the New. You know, so that's it. We're going to look at Sarah from this standpoint, that she's revealing what's going to happen in the time to come. You know, that her story, that this story is revealing to us, you know, stuff concerning the New Testament. So we're going to take a look again at Genesis 18:9. It says, and they said unto him, where is Sarah thy wife? So another way of looking at this is, where is that renewed covenant, thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. You know, now I'm going to attempt to show you this passage from a Hebraic mindset, which focuses more on the similarity of function than the similarity of vision. See, the Western mindset look at things, you know, and they look for similarities betwixt the things that they can see. You know, so they may say it's similar if you have two books. They're different titles, but you recognize them both the same thing because they're books, both as books. You know, see, but from the Eastern mindset, they don't look at things and focus on the similarity betwixt what they look like. They look at things and focus on the similarity betwixt their function. And so what I'm gonna try to show you the spiritual picture that's being depicted here, that's being painted here, that I think oftentimes go unnoticed. Okay, so first of all, you know, it says when they first came that Abraham was sitting in the door of the tent. Amen? Okay, now, that word tent is ohel, and I believe it's number 168 in the Hebrew, and it's the very same word that's translated tabernacle many places. Now, consider this. Hebrews 9, 1 through 5, it says, then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service in a worldly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick and the table and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant, overlaid round about with gold, wherein the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, and over it the cherubim of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Now, what I want you to see is that the tabernacle of Elohim can be seen even in this tent that Abraham and Sarah was in. You know, because they're both tents. They're both a type of tabernacles. Amen? Okay, now, the important thing to take note of is that it never tells us of Sarah leaving out of the woman's quarters. And the woman's quarters of the tent or tabernacle was the farmost quarters. The front part was the men's section. And that was the part that company oftentimes came in. Now, when we're talking about the tabernacle of Elohim, you know, this is where it speaks about the first, wherein was the candlestick, the table, and showbread, you know, which is called the sanctuary. So this is where Abraham was sitting, you know, and those who would sit in the door of the tabernacle were the priest, you know. So this is a spiritual picture of showing that how Abraham truly was, you know, a type of priest, you know, and he truly was making types of sacrifices, you know, spiritually speaking, that is. Okay, so I pray that you can follow along with this illustration, you know, because it's a beautiful picture. Now, take note that Sarah represents what? The renewed covenant, right? Okay, so if we're going to liken their tent to the tabernacle of Elohim, then Sarah will be likened unto what? The Ark of the Covenant. Absolutely. Okay, now, the Ark of the Covenant was kept where in the tabernacle of Elohim? Holiest of Holies, which was the farmost back of the tent. Amen? Sarah is where? She's in the women's quarters, and the women's quarters is also in the farmost back of the tent. You know, and Sarah represents the renewed covenant. Can you see the parallel? You know, now it says what was in there was the golden pot of manna. You know, that represents Yahshua, the bread of life. Aaron's rod that budded, that represents Yahshua's death and resurrection, because the rod was dead, and then Yah caused it to come back alive and bud and bear fruit. You know, and the tables of the covenant, that represents the commandments, statutes, and decrees of Elohim. Amen? You know, so now it says, and over it, the cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat. Now, this would happen a little later, you know, but in Exodus 4:34 it says, then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of Yahuwah filled the tabernacle. Right. See, now Sarah never came out of the woman's quarter. She never came out the Holy of Holies, or the most set apart part of the tent. But Yah would eventually go back there. Yep. Because he was going to cause her to bring forth a child. Yep. Right. That's it. So he was going to go back there, you know, even with Sarah and Abraham. See, because this was a three-part thing that he was doing. See, because Sarah and Abraham, even though they had been trying for the last 25 years, they could not bring forth a child. Right. They needed Yah's help. That's right. Yeah. They couldn't do it on their own. Right. So I want you to be able to see that, you know, because it's likewise, you know, if we're going to bring forth a child, you know, those of us who are in the renewed covenant, if we're going to bring forth a child, even as Sarah did, we won't be able to do it alone either. Yeah, that's right. Amen? Amen. You know, so I want you to be able to see this picture, you know, because who is this that came to the tent? We have someone that represents Yah himself and two angels. Yeah. Now, what is in the Holy of Holies? You know, there's the mercy seat where the presence of Yah dwells. And there's two angels. Yeah. Two cherubim. Yeah, over there, exactly. Can you see the parallel? Yeah. Oh, yes. I pray you can see this picture, because it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. You know, so I'm trying to show you this so that you can understand some of the deeper things of the word. You know. Yes. Now, let me have my next reader read Genesis 18:10 through 14, please.
And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, and were well stricken in age. And they ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Adonai being old also? And Yahuwah said unto Abraham, wherefore doth Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for Yahuwah? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son.
Hallelujah. Okay, so one of the things I want you to take note of is how many times the word old was used within this short little passage. It was used 4 times. You know, so, you know, Scripture is trying to call your attention to something. You know, it's trying to call your attention to something is old. Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Okay, so now, remember, we're dealing with the spiritual aspect of things. It says, and he said, I will certainly return unto thee to the time of life. And lo, Sarah, now Sarah represents who? The renewed covenant, right? Yes. And thy wife, Sarah thy wife, will have a son. So the new covenant which represents New Jerusalem, which represents those of us who are subject to Yahshua's commandments, words, and sayings, are going to give birth to a son. But they're going to give birth to a son when they are old. Okay, now, Sarah represents the new covenant. When did the renewed covenant come into play? Absolutely, right before Yahshua offered up his life. Amen.
Amen.
He brought the 12 disciples in the covenant, right?
Yes.
That was the beginning of that renewed covenant, right? About how long ago was that? Almost about approximately 2,000 years, right? I think Sarah kind of old. What you think?
Kind of weird.
I think Sarah kind of old. See, you have to be able to see the spiritual picture that's being painted here. You know, Yah is trying to show you that this renewed covenant is going to be very old before it gives birth. Now, the number, they had been trying to give birth for 25 years on their own. 25 is the number of forgiveness. During this long time, during this long stretch of this renewed covenant, Yah has been working to forgive everyone of their sins.
That's it.
But there's coming a time when that time of forgiveness is going to be shut off. It's going to be closed up. The doors are going to be closed. Amen.
Amen.
You know, so what I'm trying to show you is way back when, you know, Yah had been teaching concerning his renewed covenant and what would happen before it even happens. You know, like I tried to tell you last week, we have tomorrow's newspaper. When we're looking at the scriptures, we're looking at tomorrow's newspaper. It's just a matter of you know how to read it.
Right.
You know, so the thing that I want to point out is that this renewed covenant, you know, even though we call it the new covenant, it's quite old. Amen?
Amen.
It's quite old. It's as old as Sarah was when she was 89 years old. Amen? It's as old as Abraham was when he was 99 years old. Okay? So we're talking about, you know, something that has waxed really old. But Yah says that it's going to bring forth a child. No matter how old it is.
That's right.
Amen?
Yes.
You know, Yah says in verse 14, well, first of all, he says in verse 14, he says, is anything too hard for Yahweh?
Hallelujah.
And then he says, at the time of appointed. You know, these words at the time appointed is Moed, number 4150. You know, where we get Moedim. It speaks to Yah's appointed time. So this is likely, you know, a remez, a hint, a sign that it's going to happen during one of Yah's feast days.
Yes.
You know, he says, at the time appointed, at the appointed time I will return unto thee. According to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. You know, now, this is also prophesied of New Jerusalem, which is likened unto who? Sarah.
Yes.
You know, so let's take a look at this prophecy that's prophesied for New Jerusalem, that's prophesied for Sarah, you know, spiritual Sarah, I should say. Let me have my next reader read Isaiah 66, 5 through 7, please. I think it goes until like verse 15.
Isaiah 66:5. Hear the word of Yahuwah, ye that tremble at his word. Your brethren that hateth you, that cast you out for my name's sake, said, let Yahuwah be glorified. But he shall appear to your joy, and they shall be ashamed. A voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice of Yahuwah that rendereth recompense to his enemies. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the birth, and not cause to bring forth, saith Yahuwah? Shall I cause to bring forth, and shut the womb, saith my Elohim? Rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all ye that love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all ye that mourn for her. that ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolations, that ye may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. For thus saith Yahuwah, Behold, I will extend peace to her like a river, and the glory of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. Then shall ye suck, you shall be borne upon her sides, and be dandled upon her knees. As one whom his mother comforteth, so will I comfort you, and ye shall be comforted in Jerusalem. And when ye see this, your heart shall rejoice, and your bones shall flourish like an herb, and the hand of Yahuwah shall be known toward his servants, and his indignation toward his enemies.
Hallelujah. Now, if you're in the renewed covenant of Yahshua, then this is speaking to you. You know, and Yah is saying that Sarah, no matter how old she is, this renewed covenant, no matter how old it is, that it's going to give birth.
Hallelujah.
It's going to give birth. I love verse 8. You know, Isaiah 66, it says, you know, who have heard such a thing? Who have seen such things? This is the same thing that Sarah was thinking back then.
Yep.
You know, who have heard such a thing? Who have seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? You better believe it.
Yes, you can. Oh, yeah.
Just as sure as Sarah had a son, so will this renewed covenant also have a son.
Yes,
And he says, for as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. He tells us, rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all ye that love her. Anybody love her?
Love her.
That ye may suck and be satisfied with the breast of her consolations. You know, he says, then shall ye suck, ye shall be borne upon her sides, and be dandled upon her knees. And ye shall be comforted in Jerusalem. And when ye see this, your heart shall rejoice, and your bones shall flourish like an herb. And the hand of Yahuwah shall be known toward his servants. I'm here to tell you, is anything too hard for Yahuwah? Absolutely not. Luke 1:37 says, for with Elohim nothing shall be impossible. We know that if he said it, it's going to come to pass. You know, it's not too hard for him. You're going to look up one day and Zion is going to bring forth. You're going to look up one day and a nation will be born all at one time. It's going to be a nation of the believers of the Most High El. Amen. It's coming. You can bet on it. Don't bet on it, but you can count on it. You know?
That's right.
All right, Genesis 18:15 through 17 says, then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And if she was afraid, that means we going to be afraid
That's right.
too.
Yeah.
And he said, nay, but thou didst laugh. And the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And Yahuwah said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? You know, Sodom, you know, speaks to that which is burning or scorched. Okay? And we're gonna talk about Sodom in a minute, because we need to understand what Sodom represents spiritually, and we're gonna understand the fullness of this message that's being given us. You know, but verse 17 says, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Shall I hide from you all that thing which I shall do? You know, if we don't want what Yah's going to do to be hidden from us, then we need to become as Abraham.
Yep.
Amen? You know, now, he says in Amos 3:7, he says, surely the Adonai Yahuwah will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. You know, Apostle Paul says that the greatest of all the gifts is the gift of prophecy. He tells you to pray for the gift of prophecy.
Yeah.
You know, Revelation teaches that the testimony of Yahushua is even the gift of prophecy. Amen?
Amen.
You know, so here it is. He revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. And Abraham was called a prophet. So he was going to tell him what he was going to do. Because he don't keep nothing from his servants, the prophets. And Abraham showed himself to be a servant.
That's right.
And he was one of Yah's prophets. Now, Yochanan 15:14 and 15, Yahshua is speaking to his disciples. He says, ye are my friends if ye do whatsoever I command you. Now, if you want to be the friend of Elohim, I'm going to tell you the recipe. Here it is. You know, if you want to be the friend of Elohim, then do ye whatsoever he tells you.
That's right.
Well, what is he saying to do, Pastor Obadiah? He's saying to live by, not only by the bread of life, that is the commandments, words, and sayings of Yahshua, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Elohim. And that speaks to what he told Moshe and the prophets as well. Amen? You know, verse 15, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth. But I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. Yah told us everything we need to know. Just like we're seeing that there's some stuff that's in the Old Testament that's telling us what's going to happen in the end times, and he's showing this to us. I don't come up with this stuff on my own. It's by his Ruach.
Hallelujah.
He's showing it to us. He's not just showing it to me. He's showing it to us.
Hallelujah.
So that we can know. Because he wants us to be his friends.
Yes,
He wants
yes.
us to do everything that he tells us.
Yes.
So that we can be called his friends as well.
Hallelujah.
Amen. He wants us to be his servants. He wants
Yes.
us to be prophets. Amen.
Yes, yes,
He wants to reveal his secrets unto us. James 2:23, and the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed Elohim, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of Elohim. So we see that Abraham was a friend of Elohim, and we can become friends of Elohim too. All we have to do is do what Abraham did. Well, what did Abraham do? He done everything Yah told him to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we do everything he tells us to do, we can become his friends as well.
Hallelujah.
Yah is no respecter of person. If you do the same thing, you're going to get the same result.
Hallelujah.
Genesis 18 and 19, it says, seeing that Abraham shall surely become great, a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of Yahuwah to do justice and judgment, that Yahuwah may bring up Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. You know, I like the way that the scriptures put it a little bit better. You know, so I put the translation from the scriptures. First of all, you need to know this word justice literally speaks to righteousness. So I'm going to read it again from out of the scriptures. Genesis 18:19 says, for I have known him. You know, he's already been observing them. He's already been watching them. It's been 25 years since he done sent them out into the wilderness. He been watching them all that time. He's been looking out over them. He says, for I have known him, so that he commands his children. Not that he will, he already does. So that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the way of Yahuwah. See, and that's what we're supposed to be doing too. We're supposed to be doing it ourselves and teaching our children to do it as well.
Yes.
To do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahuwah brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. You know, and if we do likewise everything that he asks us to do, and if we operate in and walk in the guard the way of Yahuwah, to do righteousness and right ruling, you know, then he'll bring forth all those promises that's concerning us as well. You know, 1 Thessalonians 5:4-5 says, but ye brethren are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. You know, if you're still in darkness, you know, and you're not getting no light, you know, then you need to question as to are you doing everything that you're supposed to do? You know, because he says that he'll reveal it to you. Isn't that what he said?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's what he said. He said his friends, they gonna know what he do. You know, now you may just be a servant and you don't know, but if you do everything he tell you to do and you become his friend, he gonna let you know. You know, this is why 1 Thessalonians 5:5 goes on to say, ye are all the children of light and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness.
Hallelujah.
Amen. You know, so, you know, Yah wants us to know
Yes.
what he's doing. He wants us to know what his plan is. This is why he's written his word and given it to us. But it's not written in a way where anybody can just read and understand it, you know, because he wants those who have a right heart, those who seek after him with their whole heart. Only they will find it. Only they will receive it. You know, he's put safeguards there so that those that are of the night and those that are of darkness, that they don't trespass, that they don't come in. All right, let me have my next reader read Genesis 18:20-26, please.
And Yahuwah said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which has come unto me, and if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before Yahuwah. And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city, wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And Yahuwah said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes.
Continue on to 33, please.
And Abraham answered and said, Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Adonai, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous, wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, If I find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again, and said, Peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, O let Adonai not be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall be 30 found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Adonai. Peradventure it shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, O let not the Adonai be angry, and I will speak but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And Yahuwah went his way, as soon as he left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place.
Hallelujah. And they say Yah mean in the Old Testament. That's grace and mercy right there.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
Now, there's much to be learned here. So, but first we must understand the spiritual significance of Sodom. You know, and so I want us to understand what Sodom represents, because when we understand what Sodom represents, then we understand the picture and the message that's being given even here in Genesis 18. You know, when we look at Jeremiah 23:13 and 14, it says, And I have seen folly in the prophets of Samaria. They prophesied in Baal and caused my people, Israel, to err. He goes on in verse 14 and says, I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem an horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies. They strengthen also the hands of evildoers, that none doeth return from his wickedness. They are all of them unto me as Sodom, and the inhabitants thereof as Gomorrah. You know, what I want to point out is that the priesthood, the temple, Jerusalem, old Jerusalem as a whole, you know, that all that was depicted as Sodom in the eyes of Yah. Yeshayahu or Isaiah 3:8 and 9, for Jerusalem is ruined and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against Yahuwah, to provoke the eyes of his glory. The show of their countenance doeth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. So again, we see a second witness here that Jerusalem is as Sodom. You know, and so that's real. That becomes real revelatory. You know, because here it is. We see here in Genesis 18 that Sodom is about to get destroyed. Yep. You know, and so that becomes real revelatory when you start considering who Sarah is. Sarah represents the renewed covenant, right? Yeah. So we're talking about Sodom or Jerusalem being destroyed after the new covenant has been instituted. Everybody still with me? You know, now think about this, because this is a prophecy concerning the destruction of Jerusalem even before Jerusalem even became a city of Yah's people. Luke 13:33 and 34, our Messiah speaking, says, Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, which killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, How often would I have gathered thy children together as a hen doeth gather her brood under her wings, and ye would not? You know, so I want you, when you see Sodom and you consider Sodom here in Genesis, I want you to think about Jerusalem. You know, now also I have a third witness. It's found in Revelations 1:11, 1 through 8. Now, this is concerning the two witnesses that Yah would send. Now, I want you to think about this, and while I'm reading this, I want you to think about the story of Lot that's coming up. I want you to think about what we just read here in Genesis 18 and how the two angels are heading towards Lot. They're heading towards Sodom. Okay, and this is why Abraham was interceding for Lot, asking, if there's 50 righteous, will you save the city? If there's 45, if there's 40, if there's 30, if there's 20, if there's 10. He was trying to save his nephew Lot. You know, so he's saying if there's any righteous in there, don't destroy the righteous with the wicked. And Yah said, of course not. I will save, not only will I save the righteous, I'll spare the whole city if it's just 10 of them. But unfortunately, there wasn't 10 of them. You know, so he did save Lot. You know, see, so what is this telling us? This is telling us that during this time that we're going to have to be interceding for Lot. Now, Lot represents the priesthood. He represents Jerusalem. He represents the old covenant. We're going, during this time to come, before Sarah, the renewed covenant, give birth, we're going to have a time when we're going to have to be really interceding real heavily for those in Jerusalem. This is what this is showing us. This is what Abraham is going through all this for. You know, going back and forth with Yah, trying to make certain that the righteous get saved. Amen?
Amen.
Now, we're going to fast forward and see what's going to be going on during times to come. Revelations 11, 1 through 8. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of Elohim and the altar and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall be tread under 40, underfoot 40 in 2 months. And I will give power unto my two witnesses. And they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the Elohim of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devour of their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have the power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over the waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Adonai was crucified. You know, so I pray that you can see that this is a prophecy yet to be fulfilled concerning Jerusalem. You know, and so this is something that's still yet to come. But when we look at Genesis 18, we see what has already happened was prophesied way before Jerusalem even before Yah even put his name in Jerusalem. Way before. Israel hadn't even become a nation yet. Can you see this? You know, but Yah is prophesying to us concerning the Messiah and concerning the renewed covenant that he would establish when he would come. You know, and so here it is, we see in a spiritual picture in Genesis 18 that Jerusalem will be destroyed after that covenant, is spoken to. And that's exactly what happened. You know, so when you consider Sodom, when you're going through Genesis, you should think Jerusalem. You know, and this is a picture of Jerusalem in case you're not familiar with what it looks like. That's what it looks like. Hallelujah. Okay, so there's much to be learned from this account. Firstly, is that Yah would first come prior to the destruction of Sodom. He would. This is what Genesis 18 was teaching, even way back when, that Yah would first come prior to the destruction of Sodom or Jerusalem. which he did. You know, Yahshua came, and he came prior to the destruction of Sodom and Jerusalem, and he even prophesied of his destruction before he left, did he not? You know, now the thing for us is that he will return in the appointed time after it's been destroyed and Sarah has given birth. That's the message for us now today. Everybody's wondering when Yahshua is going to come back. Well, he's going to come back after Sarah, the renewed covenant, gives birth to those spiritual sons. That's when he's going to come back. John 3:5-7, Yahushua answered, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of Ruach, he cannot enter into the kingdom of Elohim. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of Ruach is Ruach. Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again." You know, there has to be some birthing going on. Romans 8:18-21, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of Elohim." That's what the whole world is waiting on. That's the earnest expectation of the creatures that's waiting for the manifestation of the sons of Elohim. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of Elohim. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. It's coming a time they're going to be given birth, and they're going to come forth even as a nation, all at one time in one day. That's all I have for you today. Pray it was a blessing.
Hallelujah.